Thank you, everybody, for joining today. I want to welcome everybody to today's webinar. Before we get started, just a few quick tips. I will try to keep an eye on any questions that come in through the Q&A panel and jump into them if appropriate during the talk or covered at the end. We're also going to record this webinar so that if you have to drop off at some point or catch up on it later or rewind and replay certain pieces, that'll be there as well. So with that sort of standard online webinar introduction, let's really kick things off. What we wanted to talk about today is the future of sales forecasting, the black art of what's going on out there and how it is, black magic or dark arts, however you want to say it, of how we've tried to figure out what's in pipeline and how much that has changed. And if we really thinking about the most recent changes, I don't know if I can start a day without another news article crossing my path on generative AI, ChatGPT, Google Bard, and the like. I've played around with even writing blogs on them to see what kind of a response I would get. So this webinar is going to be talking about AI as well, but focusing it in instead of, somebody writing a high school or college paper about it, instead talking about AI's impact on actually being able to predict revenue and manage deals. Applied AI has been with us for a while. It's getting even better, and it's only going to change. My name is Erik Charles. I'm the interim CMO at Xactly. I've been with the company since 2011. And more importantly, to pull together some experts on this, I invited two people to join me. The first from a fellow Xactly officer is Arnab Mishra, who's our COO. He's been with us for quite a while. And the great thing is he has touched product management and strategy, professional services, customer experience, engineering, and tech operations. With all of that it brings in, we've had several conversations around generative AI and even the AI that we've already gotten some of our existing tools, and it's been great. He's been a great partner of mine and a great collaborator on where things are going. Now, then to bring in the outside perspective, we invited Anthony McPartlin as a principal. He's a principal analyst at Forrester, and his perspective on strategic sales operations, global software industry experience that he brings to the table, and his track record of actually solving a lot of the complex challenges that companies face. These challenges are things like compensation, analytics, technology, planning, pricing. So I'm bringing two great experts into this conversation to get into where we're going and how this is all working in sales forecasting, how AI can have an impact, what people can expect today, and what people should be watching for in the coming weeks, months, and years. So with that, I'm going to kick it off to Anthony. And unmute, my friend. There we go.
There we go. Yeah, thank you, Erik. I'm delighted to be here. And, I think 2023, it's been a kind of a breakout year for AI, right? And what I mean by that is that the arrival of generative AI has brought kind of AI from the future to the here and now for the wider public, right? In terms of our ability to see real world application, to be able to interact with it, and to see the kind of impacts that it can have. And so, AI is moving beyond the realms of kind of data scientists into something that all of us can utilize. And, we can create 3D avatars of ourselves. We can create kind of futuristic impossible art. We can stretch the boundary maybe of what's real and what's fake in images, in word, in music. If you want to hear Elvis sing Billie Jean, you can, right? That's all possible now. And of course, students the world over, including my two teenagers, are trying to figure out how they're going to use this stuff to maybe avoid more work. And, of course, sales is, as is often the case, sales is been very quick to start to figure out how to exploit these capabilities. And, we're seeing now a pretty consistent stream of product updates, launches through this year, and we'll probably hear a little bit more today, that incorporates generative AI. And, the focus of these innovations is it's primarily around providing greater automation support for sellers, to help them with their productivity, help them in terms of their ability to create maybe better, faster content, and to create, ultimately more engaging interactions with buyers that add more value and create more differentiation. So you're seeing things like optimization of cadences and call scripts as some of the use cases, development of blogs, proposal response, email response, personalized videos and calls, social posts, call summaries, follow-ups. They're all in the process of being disrupted, improved, and made far more efficient by generative AI, with the prospect of really significant productivity and quality improvement. Now, while this session isn't specifically about Gen AI, we do want to take a look today at what innovations like these mean for sales forecasting, and how what remains a key sales capability is likely to evolve as these different AI technologies are increasingly brought to bear. So we'll talk today about why sales forecasting remains a critical capability in B2B. We'll look at how it's evolved and where it's going to go to next. But I think more importantly, we'll talk about what it means for sellers and for buyers as well. And then I think Arnab will also give us a perspective on how Xactly Forecasting enables this critical sales process. So the external market volatility that we've seen in recent years, and that's certainly continuing into 2023, has made accurate forecasting really crucial for sales leaders who are seeking to manage organizational expectations and perceptions, as well as external perceptions. And sales leaders' credibility is put on trial really as corporate leaders look for reliable performance signals that enable them to control costs, to make prudent investment decisions. And as the business grows, it has to reach particular milestones that come with pretty serious expectations from leadership, maybe from ownership, and some of the different external market stakeholders. So missing your number comes with serious implications for the organization and then obviously those who lead the sales function. And despite that, our data shows that sales forecasting still remains a challenge for a lot of B2B sales organizations. Predictable revenue, may never have been so important, but a lot of B2B organizations have zero or very limited visibility into buying interactions between sellers and buyers, buying signals, buying intentions. So really, they're pretty heavily reliant on manual processes to capture that type of information, and they're heavily reliant on rep opinion when it comes to that type of information, and then using it to predict revenue. And as you can see here, it kind of has predictably poor results. 79% of organizations are still missing their forecast by 10% or more. So, we're going to take a look at why that is. But, before we do, maybe I can ask Arnab to come in here and maybe talk to us about some of the financial imperatives that, you see connected to this challenge.
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. I mean, I think, overall, we at Xactly are seeing some of the very same things that you and your team are observing. And I think the thing that we would add is, related to this very unique moment in time that we're currently in, macroeconomically. I think as most everyone knows, over the last year, we've gone through pretty much a sea change in how companies are evaluated and what is expected of companies by the marketplace. And that's really a function of us coming out of an era where interest rates were effectively zero for quite some time. Capital was flowing, pretty unchecked to many, many companies. And the only thing that really mattered was growth. But in the last year, reserve banks around the world have started increasing interest rates because we've seen inflation rear its, ugly head. And that's really a function of the imbalances that we saw in the global economy, largely due to the pandemic in many cases. And now that capital effectively has a cost again, markets are expecting companies to deliver, profits and deliver profitable growth. And that's a pretty, significant change for many sales organizations as they have to think about, not growth at all costs, but delivering efficient growth. The most common measure of this is something that is called Rule of 40. So if you haven't heard of Rule of 40, it's effectively summing a company's revenue growth with its profitability, with its EBITDA margin. And those two percentages combined, if they're at, the benchmark is to be at 40 or higher for kind of best in class companies. And as that sort of expectation has filtered its way through companies and into sales orgs, we have found that best in class companies are really doing a handful of things to reset and to refocus their efforts. The first thing we're seeing is much greater rigor and discipline in managing sales processes. This is everything from making sure you're focusing on the right KPIs to instrumenting the business to track and report on these measures. Managers are spending a lot more time on inspection of deals and inspection of processes with a much greater focus on driving predictable results. Xactly Forecasting has been a really powerful tool used by a lot of these managers when it comes to pipeline management and breaking down forecasts by territory and segment, measuring how deals are converting from stage to stage. And in general, the real focus we hear from sales leaders is, how do I create an environment where there are no surprises? This also then translates into a number of conversations our customers are having around efficiency of their go-to-market activities and teams. We're seeing customers be a lot more rigorous and thinking about what is the ROI on these investments we're making. And so we're helping our customers by helping them understand where reps are spending their time and which of those rep activities are actually yielding the best results. And then the last thing that we've observed among the best sales leaders is a recognition that in this environment, while most great sales leaders have great instincts and they've got a great sort of gut about which deals will happen and which won't happen, they have to now balance that with a lot more data and a lot more rigor. And so that's required them to lean into what I would call the science of sales management and sales execution, and they're leveraging Xactly's tools, in particular Xactly Forecasting, to great effect in that effort.
Fantastic. I think it's a good time for one of the first to check in the pulse of the audience. We'll kick off this poll right now. And what I'm looking at is, when we start talking about this, and Arnab, you and I have talked about this before, and Anthony on some of the briefings I've had with you. Once you brought in that Rule of 40, there is this issue around both profits, obviously with the EBITDA margin, and revenue growth, which also impacts the accruals throughout the quarter. And when you can't get the revenue forecast done correctly, when you can't get the sales forecast done, which then gets in the way of finance, of the controller being able to perhaps adjust spending to maintain that. It's like, oh, hold it, if we're not bringing in the revenue, maybe we should scale back a little bit on the spend. Or if revenue is going great, is this a good time to be able to invest on a constant basis? And if you don't have the right tools in place, where it's just wetting a finger and sticking it up in the air to try, do I really trust what sales is calling? It's got to be creating a lot of gray hairs in the finance team. So, seeing how people are coming in, I'm seeing, it's funny. It's like, I'm looking at the poll and I've got, the majority of the votes seem to be on just poor accuracy and predictability is the biggest issue that it looks like our audience is seeing. So with that, we'll give it a second and close the poll and move on to the next question. There we go. Poll should be closed. Let's go and move on to the next slide. There we are.
Yeah, so I think it's helpful to think about the evolution of sales forecasting in terms of 3 ages. So the first age you can kind of think of as forecasting 1.0. So this is forecasting before forecasting technology, unless you consider Excel technology, which technically it is. Forecasting 2.0 really describes what's happened to forecasting when we start to apply these new technologies to augment that seller opinion, as we'll see in a minute. And then finally, forecasting 3.0 takes a look at where we see the forecasting process going next, as these innovations around AI start to speed up and start to impact the sales organization in a lot of different ways. So, if we think about that first age of forecasting, it's very seller centric. It's really dependent on individual reps to determine which deals are going to close, when, and at what value. And as a result, it's highly prone to seller and in some cases manager bias. And of course, at all levels of the organization, this type of forecasting, is usually prone to a certain level of manipulation. Let's be honest about it. But the bigger problem is that it's just inaccurate, right? In fact, most organizations, and we shared some data at the start here, right? But most organizations have little idea of how accurate their forecasts actually are because they've no way of measuring it, right? And all of this leads to a very time-consuming and a very unproductive process that provides little business value, either to our reps, our line managers, to operations, or to those executives who have to set expectations elsewhere. So in an environment where digital interaction is becoming the primary mode of engagement with so many of our prospects and customers, it's leaving a lot of organizations exposed. They have this limited view into what's going on, what interactions are taking place. And so it's very hard to assess what those interactions mean for a whole range of performance areas, buying dynamics, seller performance, and, crucially, predictable revenue. So, relying on spreadsheets and opinion alone are never going to deliver predictable forecasting. So it's really time for change. And, I think there's a lot of organizations in B2B who have recognized that, right? And who are moving away from some of these, what you might call outdated approaches. So they've embraced what I'm calling here the augmented age of forecasting. And what we mean by that is that in this approach, we're kind of giving the traditional forecasting a serious upgrade. So machine learning predictions based on historical data are augmenting the opinion of sellers and managers. They're improving forecast accuracy, and they're driving much greater accountability because there's huge amount of transparency that comes with that in terms of what interactions are taking place, how are those things driving different outcomes for customers across our pipeline and the opportunities that we're managing. So augmented forecasting, it captures those interactions, whether they're voice, email, and elsewhere, and then it's either going to overlay them as decision criteria or even build them directly into the machine learning algorithm. So augmented forecasting, it brings major improvements for operations and leadership by giving them a structured way to collect, to aggregate, and then update forecasts from across the organization. You think about the organizations who are doing it in Excel, that aggregation process is so time consuming, it's so error prone. And so when it comes to adoption of these types of modern sales forecasting approaches, there's still a lot of companies still stuck in that forecasting 1.0, and they're spending that serious amount of their time, seller time, manager time, operations time on a process that's really delivering limited value. So for these types of organizations, shifting to augmented forecasting should be a real priority. It's going to radically improve their forecast accuracy. It's going to reduce the effort involved for everyone concerned. That can be redirected towards higher value customer facing activity. Arnab?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Anthony. I think we at Xactly share a lot of the same perspective that you just articulated. And when we think about the work that we're doing with Xactly Forecasting, it's very much rooted in the perspective of the salesperson. In particular, I think we recognize that salespeople live in a really dynamic world. They're constantly juggling customer needs, they're juggling competitive pressures, they're trying to meet companies' goals. And our focus is, how do we provide technology to them so that they can make the best decisions that they can make at any moment in time, so that they spend their time as effectively as possible. And so the application does that in a number of different ways by making it easier to monitor pipeline health and conversion rates, and so they can identify risks in deals early and then take action on those risks. Speaking to your point about the augmented forecasting, we think AI is super helpful and important there, and so we leverage AI and machine learning to provide deal-specific guidance on kind of what next steps a rep should take to progress a deal. We also provide that to their sales managers, so the managers can coach those reps by providing insights to help deliver continuous rep improvement. In this area of AI, we've also not only been spending time on the efficacy of our models and predictions, but also making those predictions much more accessible to the users. As a result, we've spent a lot of time working on the explainability of our AI predictions so that users can easily understand why is the system making the prediction that it's making, so that they can calibrate their perspective around that prediction. We've also tightly integrated our forecasting applications, I think Erik was alluding to, with our other technologies, in particular our incentive compensation technology. And this allows us to deliver some very unique capabilities to the market that no other vendor is providing today. For example, we have the ability to run all the deals in the forecast through our compensation calculation engine, and then display to the reps the commissions that they would receive if the deal closed as currently forecasted. And so we find in customers that this level of visibility is really invaluable in helping drive the behaviors that are necessary for the company to achieve their goals, and to make sure that the reps are sort of living by the incentive plan and the goals of that plan.
All right, so this will bring us to our second of two polling questions, and it's an interesting one because I remember being asked how would I do my forecasting when I was running sales, and I still have a small sales team that I'm managing right now. And it was like, usually it was like walking into the boss's office and writing, making the commit while truly doing a stand up, or maybe opening up the CRM and saying, oh, how about this deal? How about this deal? How about this deal? Those are some small companies. Once you start getting 20 reps, 50 reps, 100 reps, 1,000 reps, 10,000 reps, it starts getting a lot more complicated to do that. And, the chalkboard, whiteboard isn't quite working. One of the answers here, and I'm seeing the first few votes are actually people are saying, yeah, we're on a spreadsheet, something we kind of built ourselves that works the best we can. The BI tools are trying to get in there. And then, of course, there's the dedicated sales forecasting solutions like Xactly has. So how companies manage their forecast, I think there's still this mental thought for a lot of firms of, we don't necessarily know a better way to do this. We don't know where to take it. So with that, I think, we can go ahead and close the poll. I don't like these take up too much time on the screen. And we'll share out more of the results of this poll and some of the other research and analysis that we've done through the years that we've been developing the products. And we'll move on to the next part of the conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Erik. So, if what I and Arnab have described is where forecasting capability is today, although recognizing, Erik's comments about the fact that, many have still to kind of make that leap, what does the future look like? Where is this all going? And, I think it's kind of helpful to think about what the future could be in terms of what are the challenges that still remain to be solved in sales forecasting. And there's a couple of here that I think are worth mentioning. The first of these is the ability to be able to consistently assign the right contacts and activities to the right opportunity within an account, that may have multiple ongoing opportunities. And that's a complex problem to resolve, and one that providers are working on today and will have to lean heavily on AI to fully resolve. Today, while forecasting platforms are capturing what's going on between providers and target accounts in terms of just raw activity, right? What's going on? A next step will be to start capturing maybe more comprehensively the perceptions coming out of those interactions. So, how did it leave the buyer feeling about the situation? What's the sentiment coming out of these interactions? What does it tell us about what's working, what isn't working, through their decision journey, and how it impacts the deal probability? Another area that's really, I think, going to become increasingly important is being able to leverage these platforms to understand more about the buyers and their behavior, to think about how these individuals interact, how they prefer to interact, their levels of participation and how that changes through different stages in the sales cycle, their degree of influence, not just on our deals, but maybe also on the deals that they're involved in across the market, right? And that's a very different type of challenge, being able to get access to a much broader data set. And so as we think about the future of forecasting, we need to think about the fact that it's not just about making the number. It's also, the goal is really about beating the number. So it's about optimizing our outcomes. And to make that happen, we have to provide more dynamic guidance to sellers about what is working. We have to give them a kind of a feedback loop that's pulling in, okay, if we're having these interactions, are they driving the outcomes that we want? What do we see working in other parts of the organization or in other sales teams that we can leverage and scale to inform sellers around where they should be, focusing their efforts. So in order so that we can get towards those best outcomes. And then, finally, the late stages of the deal cycle present some unique challenges for forecasting, because transparency becomes a lot less as the deal enters that kind of murky phase of internal client approval. So there's some room there in terms of helping, or for AI, I think, to kind of help shine more of a light on what is a fairly delicate stage of the sales cycle today. So, at the start of the presentation, we talked about Gen AI and its impact this year on sales, its increasing influence on sales. But when it comes to forecasting, its role is going to be slightly different, right? There is a role for Gen AI in terms of interpretation, visualization of forecasting data, but it's not there to help us develop more accurate forecast models, right? Gen AI is one form of AI that's really about unleashing creativity, about driving productivity, and a better buying experience through things like automation, content creation, better engagement. And so it's certainly going to help with the interpretation and, as I said, the visualization of forecasts, but it's not focused on quantitative predictions. It's not going to provide a more accurate forecast, right? So predictive AI technology and machine learning models will focus on these, but they're going to leverage elements of generative AI to drive greater forecast consistency. So we see these two types of AI, generative AI and predictive AI, working in tandem to improve forecasting in the future, kind of serving each other's needs. Generative AI will enable, for example, sales managers to interact with forecast models, to do their own analysis and reduce some of the burden that's placed on operations. For example, using natural language queries. Predictive AI will leverage the kind of range of interactions that we're seeing more and more being driven by Gen AI to allow us to delve deeper into the buyer's context and to build more complex and more accurate forecasts. So, in reality, we've really only scratched the surface of what AI can do here. And, modern forecasting tools are getting much better at capturing and analyzing the interactions that we're having with buyers, whether it's at the contact level, at the buying group level, at the account level. But, when it comes to intent signals, those signals that give us some sort of evidence of an active buying cycle, marketing have been leveraging this type of data for some time to prioritize accounts. But in sales, its application is far more recent and limited. And I think we expect to see a larger role for this type of data in fleshing out that view of what's going on in the buying organization and where they're at. And so, we need to know, as I said, not only what interactions are taking place, but what happened, how the buyer felt about it, and what we need to do about it next. So in this third age, the data scope and the size increases with these new additions. But, what if we were able to see beyond just the interactions that our organization is having with these target accounts? What if we could see an anonymized view of activity that other third-party companies are having with those same accounts across the sales cycle on different platforms, right? Interactions, procurement activity, content sharing, proposals, not the individual details of them, but the sense of the level of activity and volume that's going on across the network. So if forecast prediction was leveraging this data as well, then it will become immensely more powerful. And, that may seem somewhat far-fetched now, but the reality is that these platform providers are sitting on a very large store of buyer intelligence that they haven't fully yet leveraged, but inevitably they will. And indeed, some of them are already beginning to do so. So, what do these innovations mean for buyers and for sellers? How does it change things? So, I think if we focus first on buyers, and we definitely should, right? In terms of the buying experience itself, it should allow us to have a much stronger understanding of the buyers themselves, their role in the organization, their role in the decision journey, their preferences, so that we can deliver a buying experience that's far more suited to their preferences, their needs. We can be more responsive. We can take down some of the noise that, without a doubt, exists in the decision cycle for buyers today. For sellers, there's a significant impact in terms of their productivity. Forecasting takes a huge amount of time for organizations currently, for many organizations. And for a lot of sellers, the perspective is, well, I'm doing this for somebody else in the organization. What am I getting back myself in terms of information, insights that help me prioritize where I should be spending my time, help me prioritize what activities I should be focusing on. And then for managers, giving them a picture around who's doing well, who's struggling at different stages in the sales process. How can I tailor the coaching, the support that I provide to my sales team, and guide them through the deals that they have so that they can be successful and get to their number. And then finally, looking across this range of stakeholders, we focus on leadership, having a much stronger level of trust in the data and the predictability and the reliability of the sales forecast, allowing us to kind of use that data for a broader range of decisions, having trust in it to set expectations, to make more informed decisions. And, for a lot of organizations, they're not there yet, but these types of innovations are helping them get there a lot more quickly. Arnab?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Anthony. I wanted to build on the point that you made about platform depth, because I think it relates well to the customers that we're working with. As we talk to our customers, the ones that are, I think, doing this well are really doing two things. One, they're thinking holistically across all of the touch points that are necessary to optimize revenue performance. And the second thing they're doing is they're designing their internal business processes so they reinforce one another and create kind of a positive feedback loop. And I think these two things make their sales forecasting activities much more impactful and effective. Because the reality is that, as we observe with our customers, there is a natural revenue lifecycle that exists in all companies. In most companies, though, this lifecycle tends to be kind of riddled with manual processes and organizational siloing and spreadsheets, which make it hard to collaborate and largely inefficient. In order to really maximize, we think, the performance of go-to-market teams, we found that best-in-class companies attack this problem end to end. And in general, as we've observed it, we've broken up this life cycle into three areas. We call it planning, performance, and prediction. And I'll describe them briefly, but I think most folks in the audience probably have a sense for kind of what we're talking about here. In terms of planning, we view go-to-market planning as all the decisions that a company needs to make to set their sales teams up for success. So it's, how many reps do I need? So what should the capacity of my sales team be? How do I set up territories to cover and attack the marketplace? How do I allocate quotas to those territories and those reps so that they're fair and equitable? And then how do I manage all the moves, adds, and changes that happen over the course of a month, a quarter, or a year? The second area, then, that all tends to be upstream from the performance area. And in the performance area, this is kind of where incentive management lives, and it's very focused on aligning the behaviors of the sales team with the needs of the corporate plan. And so that's where kind of incentives is super important. And then this third area we call prediction is really focused on the day-to-day execution of the sales team, with a particular focus on serving sales reps and sales leaders with the visibility and analytics they need to manage their day-to-day activities. And I think the key insight that many of our customers have had and that we've sort of taken to heart is when these things are done well, they very much create a self-reinforcing cycle where the sum of the parts here is much greater than the whole. The reasons that we found that these processes can be self-reinforcing if done well together is, one, they naturally share workflows, where the workflows of one part of the life cycle tend to feed into another part of the life cycle. The second reason is there's overlapping sort of people that do this work, right? It's some combination of sales ops, finance ops, sales leadership, finance leadership, executive leadership that need to come together to do this well. And so automating and investing in this allows for that collaboration. And then the third reason why it's self-reinforcing is that all of these business processes share data, where the data from one business process tends to inform decisions you make in another business process, and that becomes really important to make sure that data is sort of moving along seamlessly. And so our perspective is that companies that start by implementing a forecasting application to help their sales teams, that's a great place to start. And over time, they can think about bringing all of these processes together into an integrated life cycle. If we go to the next slide. From a customer perspective, we have found that best-in-class, customers who invest in these technologies see pretty meaningful benefits. So everything from being 10% more likely to grow their revenue year over year to being twice as likely to be in the top of their peer groups. Companies that we find that achieve these results tend to have 4 characteristics in common. One is they have a maniacal focus on enabling collaboration. I think, sort of as everyone knows, driving revenue performance is really very much a team sport. It requires people from across the organization to work together. But the challenge, again, that companies face is the siloing and the manual processes that make this collaboration, hard to do predictably. And so we've taken this to heart in Xactly Forecasting, and we allow for collaboration in a variety of different ways, whether that's sales reps collaborating on the overall team call, or whether it's managers collaborating with their sales reps, or whether it's other parts of the organization collaborating with the sales team. All of that is sort of built into the skins of the software. The second thing that we've seen is that teams that are doing well are continuously validating their instincts with data and making data-informed decisions. So from an application perspective, our key focus is surfacing the data and the insights at those critical moments when decisions need to be made. And we're doing this in a variety of ways, from AI-driven predictions to the analytics we provide. We also think, to your point, Anthony, that advancements in generative AI are going to be helpful here for users to more easily interact with the data and the predictions and achieve kind of a deeper level of understanding of how they can make the best decisions possible, because generative AI allows for that more exploratory dialogue with the data. And so we're excited about that. We're already doing work in that area, and you'll be hearing some announcements from us in the coming weeks and months in that area. The third characteristic is this notion of real-time course corrections. We generally hear this as a top-of-mind thing for C-level executives who are interested in systematically implementing continuous real-time agility in their sales orgs. And so we've done a lot of work in Xactly Forecasting to be able to surface data to those executives so that they can make those decisions. And then the final characteristic is automation. Automation is obviously important because it kind of delivers ROI. It makes it easier to make the business case for our software or for applications like ours, because you're reducing the amount of human labor in the business process. But from a salesperson's perspective, the reason to invest in automation is to relieve them of the mundane tasks that they would otherwise have to do as part of their jobs. This is particularly true in the area of like data entry or capturing information about sales interactions. And so we find companies that invest in automation really free up their sales reps to do more selling and to do more of the strategic value-added work that they want to do. And so I think the good news is that all of these characteristics are highly achievable by any company. It just requires the right kind of focus, and from a technology perspective, partnering with the right vendor who can help pull together all of the different parts of the technology and bring sort of a best understanding of best practices to bear. So if you go to the next slide. And so we as a company, obviously spend a lot of time thinking about forecasting, and when we engage with our customers, we bring our best practices and the things that we've learned to the conversation. To sort of codify that, we've built what we call a maturity model that customers can use to self-assess where they fall today in terms of their forecasting maturity. I think the reality is, and we sort of saw it in the poll results, is that a lot of companies are doing this manually. There's lots of spreadsheets, lots of ad hoc meetings. We're seeing companies kind of jerry-rig their CRM application with a BI application to run the forecasting business process. but none of these approaches scales. They're not very adaptable, and they're just hard to manage generally. And so the good news is that I think there's a lot of low-hanging fruit and opportunities for improvement for most companies. We typically recommend that customers focus on enabling their forecasting business processes by first focusing on the data flows and the analytics necessary to drive optimal decision making, and from there move on to enabling processes that allow for greater collaboration, with the end state really focused on this continuous optimization of the forecast and sharing that information across the organization. Not surprisingly, I think we believe that picking the right technology vendor is critical to enabling this evolution. And so our view is that we've taken a perspective of this end-to-end holistic approach, and it's the solutions like ours that bring all these pieces together that'll deliver the best results. You go to the next slide. And the reality, I think, is that in today's environment where companies are being asked to deliver profitable growth and do more with less, there is probably no better time, frankly, than now to engage in optimizing your forecasting business process. In the work that we've done with our customers, we've seen some pretty dramatic results. We've seen customers achieve both efficiency benefits as well as top-line revenue benefits. On the efficiency side of things, we've seen customers shorten their sales cycles by 10 to 20%. We've seen them increase the amount of time they spend selling by 10 to 15%. And these benefits are really the direct result of leveraging Xactly Forecasting to ensure reps are spending their time on the deals most likely to close and executing the optimal actions to close those deals, as well as automating a lot of that manual work that they'd have to do otherwise through the automation and the data flows that I mentioned. From a top-line revenue side of things, we've seen 10 to 15% increases in win rates. We've seen 3 to 5% revenue uplifts. And these results, I think, are really driven by the increased rigor that Xactly Forecasting enables in tracking pipeline health and allowing sales managers to more effectively coach their reps in leveraging the data and visibility in the Xactly Forecasting application. So we go to the next slide. And so, we have a lot of customers that obviously that are achieving these results, but I think a great example of a company that's been able to really take advantage of this technology is one of our current Xactly Forecasting customers, a company called Commonalities. They're located out of Europe, and they're a provider of cybersecurity and compliance solutions, and their business has seen very dramatic growth in the last few years. I think they've grown their sales team by over 400% just in the past couple of years. And prior to adopting Xactly Forecasting, I would say Commonalities was one of those classic companies that was in level 1 of our maturity model. They were handling much of their forecasting business processes through manual efforts, pulling data from CRM into spreadsheets, and then doing a lot of that manual manipulation, and then trying to provide visibility to all the people that needed it. After deploying Xactly Forecasting, Commonalities saw substantial improvements in the performance of their sales team. They saw 100%, they're going to be 100% forecasting accuracy with Xactly Forecasting, and they have a much more precise view of their pipeline, which just allows their team to be much more effective in how they spend their time. And I think the last thing I'll say here is that Commonalities, I think, did a really good job of thinking strategically about how they use different parts of their technology stack in terms of using Salesforce or Salesforce customer to leverage Salesforce for what it's good at, and then leverage Xactly Forecasting for what it's good at, and bring those together and to deliver the optimal solution for their organization. Okay, with that, Erik, do I pass it back to you?
Yeah, thank you very much, Arnab, and thank you very much, Anthony. That was magnificent. We're down to like the last minute here for questions. A few have come in on implementation timing. I can just quickly answer that. For people choosing the Xactly solution, we see customers coming in very, very quickly. It's really measured in a matter of weeks at this point, and we're integrated with multiple CRMs, so that's not a problem. So Salesforce, Microsoft Dynamics, HubSpot are all areas we can cover with our forecasting solution. So I guess the last question I'll ask for like a quick comment from each of you. How can better forecasting help with sales execution? Lightning round. Anthony?
Yeah, I mean, there's two elements to this. The first element is really the kind of the rigor it brings, and I'll let maybe Arnab speak to that in terms of revenue management. I'll speak to it in terms of sales execution, sales productivity, and how it allows sellers to understand what's working, what isn't, how it allows managers to understand where individual sellers are excelling and where they're finding it challenging, so they can start to tailor their approach to supporting them. So for me, that's kind of at the front line. That's a key element.
Yeah, I would just add that, having a good view of what's to come and kind of where the business is going is critical if you're going to plan well for the business, if you're going to create the right incentives, if you're going to make sure the reps are spending their time on the right deals. And so, from that perspective, forecasting is unbelievably valuable when done well for any sales organization.
And then there was a request in there, and I'll start with you, Arnab, and then like same thing, Anthony. I'd love to get your thoughts. How are you incorporating, ChatGPT, generative AI? You've said it's coming, but people would love any more detail you're willing to give.
Yeah, so I think, the way we think about it is, how do you leverage, these large language models to improve the user experience? And so, we internally have sketched out, several dozen use cases where we think large language models can be helpful. Everything from data inspection to having an assistant to help you do certain tasks, to even technical tasks, right? We have technical applications, and some of them in the for technical IT users requires a little bit of SQL writing. How do you leverage a large language model to kind of generate that code? And so we think there's a ton of opportunity with large language models and generative AI, and I think we're just sort of at the beginnings of that evolution.
Okay. I want to thank both of you for a magnificent day. I want to thank our audience for joining us today, and remind everybody that they will receive a link, to this recorded broadcast if they wish to share it out or review some of the answers, questions, and slides, including there'll be a copy of the slide deck sent over and additional information. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Arnab. It was an interesting discussion, and I would almost want to refresh this in the matter of weeks, if not months, and see where AI is taking more and more of this marketplace as more and more companies are applying it like we are. So thank you, gentlemen.
Great.
Thank you.